The narrow gate is the wide embrace. In Matthew 7:13-14, Jesus says, "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." We often hear these words of Jesus and immediately think of exclusivity, don't we? That salvation is only for the few who believe the right things and say the right prayers and attend the right church. But if we take the whole Sermon on the Mount seriously, we discover something different. Jesus isn't talking about narrow beliefs. He's talking about a narrow way. It's a way of life. And paradoxically, it's this narrow way that opens us up to the widest embrace. Jesus begins the Sermon on the Mount not with doctrine, but with blessing. Blessed are the poor in spirit, those who mourn, the meek, the merciful, the peacemakers. These are not narrow categories of the elite or religiously qualified. These are the overlooked, the broken, the ones the world says don't matter, the ones Jesus draws near. The narrow path, it turns out, begins in humility, not self-righteousness. And then he goes further. He calls us to a radical way of living that confronts every instinct of self-protection and retaliation. Jesus says in Matthew 5, "You have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Now that's narrow. Not narrow in the sense of rigid dogma or theological hoops that you have to jump through, but narrow in the sense that few actually choose it. Few walk in this way of enemy love, of self-giving grace, of forgiveness without limit. It's not easy, but it is the way of life. Because here's the truth, friends. The wide road, the road that's easy and popular and well-paved, is the road of self-interest. It's the road of retribution and of judgment and of tribal belonging. It's the road that divides the world into us and them. And yes, many go that way, even religious people. Sometimes, especially religious people. But Jesus didn't come to reinforce our walls. He came to tear them down. The narrow gate is not the gate of exclusion. It's the gate of costly love. It's the cross-shaped way. The invitation, then, is not to adopt tighter boundaries. The invitation is to become more like God, who, as Jesus says, causes his sun to shine on the evil and the good. He sends his rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. This is the God who refuses to be confined by our boundaries, who welcomes the outcast, who eats with sinners, who touches lepers, who dies forgiving his enemies. So yes, the gate is narrow because grace is hard, but the embrace is wide because love makes room for all. If we want to walk this path, it will mean unlearning the easy road of judgment and rivalry. It will mean becoming poor in spirit, learning to mourn what is broken, and letting mercy shape our every step. But in the end, it leads to life. Not just life after death, but life here, now. A life freed from the burden of hate, lifted by the joy of peacemaking, and rooted in the love that cannot be shaken. So don't be afraid of the narrow way, friends. It may feel small at first, but like a seed, it grows into the widest welcome the world has ever seen. Because the narrow gate is the wide embrace.